If you're like most people, you probably start your workday around 9, wrap up by 5, and look forward to the weekend. But have you ever stopped to wonder, why do we work these hours? Who decided that 8 hours a day, 5 days a week is the gold standard? And how do we get here? I'm Shaimond, and this is It Started Somewhere, the podcast that discusses the history behind the familiar. Today we're diving into the history of the 8-hour workday and the 5-day work week. Trust me, it's a story packed with struggle, innovation, and a few surprises that change the way we live and work. Let's rewind the clock. Way back, before the Industrial Revolution, most people worked according to the sun. Farmers toiled from dawn till dusk, following the rhythms of the seasons. There were no punch clocks, no office hours, just the land and the light. But as factories began to sprout up in the 18th and 19th centuries, everything changed. Work moved indoors, and suddenly the length of the workday was in the hands of factory owners. It wasn't uncommon for workers, including children, to labor 10, 12, even 16 hours a day in horrible conditions. Imagine working from sunrise to sunset for 6 or 7 days a week. That was a reality for millions. And as you can guess, it wasn't exactly a recipe for happiness or health. By the early 1800s, workers began to push back. The first big push was for a 10-hour workday. In 1835, Philadelphia carpenters organized America's first citywide general strike for a shorter workday. Their slogan, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what you will. But progress was slow. It wasn't until after the Civil War that the movement really gained steam. In 1866, the National Labor Union became the first national organization to call for an 8-hour workday. They argued that long hours were unsustainable and harmful to both adults and children. 2 years later, in 1868, Congress passed an 8-hour law for federal employees. But it was a bit of a hollow victory. While the law said workers should only work 8 hours, wages were cut by 20% to compensate. So many workers ended up working longer hours just to make ends meet. President Andrew Johnson even told the delegation, "I can't directly commit myself to an 8-hour day." But he did say he favored the shortest number of hours consistent with the interests of all. Still, the movement kept growing. By the 1870s, 8-hour leagues were popping up across the country, holding rallies and parades. In 1872, 100,000 New York City workers, mostly in the building trades, went on strike for the 8-hour day. The movement reached a boiling point in 1886. That year, the Federation of Organized Trades and Labor Unions called for a national strike on May 1st, demanding an 8-hour workday. Workers across the country answered the call. In Chicago, 10,000 people struck peacefully. But things turned violent when police opened fire on demonstrators, killing 4. The next night, at a rally in Haymarket Square, a bomb exploded among police ranks, leading to more bloodshed and a backlash against labor unions. The Haymarket Affair, as it became known, set the movement back for decades. But it also brought national attention to the issue. The slogan, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what you will, became a rallying cry for workers everywhere. Despite the setbacks, the idea for a shorter workday stuck by the turn of the 20th century. More and more workers were winning reduced hours, but there was still no national standard. Fast forward to the 1930s. The country was in the grip of the Great Depression. Unemployment was sky high, and workers were desperate for relief. Enter President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his New Deal. In 1933, Roosevelt signed the National Industrial Recovery Act, which set a maximum work week of 40 hours. Effectively creating the 8-hour workday as we know it. The idea was to spread work among more people and improve working conditions. But the NIRA was later declared unconstitutional. No worries, Roosevelt wasn't done yet. In 1938, he signed the Fair Labor Standards Act, which guaranteed a minimum wage and required overtime pay for any work over 44 hours a week. 2 years later, the act was amended to reduce the work week to 40 hours. Finally, the 8-hour workday and the 40-hour work week were the law of the land. Now, let's talk about the weekend. Believe it or not, the idea of a 2-day weekend is a relatively recent invention. Before the 20th century, most people worked 6 or even 7 days a week. The idea of a shorter work week was first proposed by British social reformer Robert Owen in 1817. He suggested that workers should have more time for rest and family, but it took a long time for the idea to catch on. Fast forward to the 1920s, factories were booming and workers were exhausted. Enter Henry Ford. In 1926, Ford made a bold move. He reduced the work week at his Michigan factories from 6 days to 5, with no cut in pay. He believed that more time off would make workers happier and more productive, and that they'd spend their extra time and money on things like cars. Ford's gamble paid off. Productivity soared, and other companies soon followed suit. The idea of the weekend was born. So how do we settle on 9 to 5? That's a bit more practical. The 9 to 5 schedule emerged as a way to synchronize work across different industries, making it easier to coordinate meetings, deliveries, and more. It also made the most of daylight hours, which was especially important before electric lighting was widespread. The 8-hour workday, 5-day work week, and 9 to 5 schedule had become the standard in the United States and much of the world. Labor unions and worker advocacy groups had fought long and hard for these rights, and their efforts changed the way we live and work. Today, the 8-hour workday and 5-day work week are so ingrained in our culture that we hardly think about where they came from. But the story is a testament to the power of collective action. It took decades of struggle, strikes, and sacrifice to win these rights. And the story isn't over. In recent years, there's been growing interest in alternative work schedules, like the 4-day work week. The COVID-19 pandemic also forced many companies to rethink how and where work gets done. Who knows? Maybe in a few decades, we'll look back at the 9 to 5 as a relic of the past. The 8-hour workday and 5-day work week weren't handed down from on high. They were fought for, one strike and one law at a time. From the fields of pre-industrial Europe to the factories of the Industrial Revolution. From the streets of Chicago to the halls of Congress. The story of the work week is a story of progress, perseverance, and the power of people coming together. Thanks for joining me on It Started Somewhere. I'm Shaimond, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe and rate the podcast. It makes a difference.